Hello, bros. We're back with Three Loves of Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky by Slonim, Marc Slonim. We're on to section 3, and we've still heard nothing about Maria. In the year 1841, when he was about to graduate, life seemed particularly hard to Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky. Is that the way you say it? How the hell do you say it? At night, he was planning his dramas and novels, but the officer in charge was harshly ordering him to bed. He might be standing at attention during a school inspection or review, but his mind was taken up with Hamlet and the poems of Pushkin. He was sent as an orderly officer to Grand Duke Michael Pavlovich, brother to the emperor, and absorbed in thoughts of his own, forgot to salute properly. They will send me fools like that, commented the Grand Duke. Fyodor's unusually intensive inner life burst forth at rare intervals. During certain disputes with his classmates, he would unexpectedly become gay, witty, and animated. His words, according to one of his comrades, were just like the spindrift of a whirlpool. But ordinarily he was morose, sad, and given to pondering on the vanity of all things under the sun. In 1841, Dostoevsky was made a junior second lieutenant and had to round out his education by attending an officer's class. This meant that he had the right to live outside the school and could enjoy comparative freedom. He rented a 4-room flat with some of his friends. Only one of the rooms was furnished, however, and spent days and nights poring over his books and writing. Dreams seethed within him. He was making the most fantastic literary plans. When Michael came from Reval to visit him, the young author read him fragments of his dramas, Maria Stuart and Boris Godunov, the manuscripts of which have disappeared without a trace. In the evenings, especially during the summer, when St. Petersburg lay shimmering and changing color under the milky white mirage of the northern twilight, he loved to roam the quay of the Neva. Sorry for butchering these words, but I'm guessing that's the quay. Quais, quay? The quay of the Neva. He became friendly with Shidlovsky, not shit, who was much the same sort of dreamer as himself, and held many talks with him, quietly yet with so much feeling and conviction that they willy-nilly infected his friend with his own hatred of injustice and his hopes for a better future for humanity. The destinies of mankind stirred him very much at the time, and he began to take an interest in social utopias. In 1843, Dostoevsky graduated as a second lieutenant and was assigned to the drafting room of the Department of Engineering. His career as an officer proved brief, however. In fact, the young lieutenant was far more taken up with the hazy contours of poor folk and the double than the exact lines of the departmental plans. There's a legend that he resigned in September 1844, a year after his appointment, because a plan he had drawn unfortunately came to the eyes of the emperor. Nicholas I is supposed to have written on it, "What idiot drew this?" The regal dictum was, according to custom, covered with a fixative so that it might not be lost to posterity. Dostoevsky, offended at the idea so uncomplimentary a comment would go down through the ages, immediately handed in his resignation. No plan with such a remark in the Tsar's hands was ever found in the administrative archives of the School of Engineering. This does not exclude the possibility, however, of its having been abstracted when Dostoevsky became famous as a writer. One thing is beyond doubt: it was no chance affront that made Dostoevsky resign his post. He simply found the work unendurable and wanted to be a writer rather than a petty officer. Once resigned, without a copper to his name, he wrote Michael, Why lose one's best years? I'll find some way of earning a crust of bread. I'm going to work like the devil. I am free now. He was interested in the novels of Eugene Sue and Frederick Sully, was translating the works of Balzac, and deep in his own literary experiments, he was organically repelled by the routine and monotony of a bureaucratic job and its rapture and its red tape rituals. He himself was very careless about details and remained so to his death. He did not know how to manage either his time or his money. Chaos reigned in his quarters, and he could pass from plenty to penury within 24 hours. He was liable to pay a usurer 100 rubles. The ruble was then worth approximately 50 cents. Interest on a 4-month loan of 300. The description of Raskolnikov's hatred. Didn't I hear that name in that other book? Raskolnikov. Hatred of the old pawnbroker was based upon the author's personal experience. Yeah, in that book, what was it called? The Trousered Apes. Wasn't that the Raskolnikovian? The Raskolnikovian. He was capable of sending down the drain in a single night the monthly remittance from his guardian, and then subsisting on tea, bread, and sausage for weeks at a stretch. The decision of Dr. Reisenkamp, a friend of Michael's, to share quarters with him proved vain. The prudent German failed to bring the lackadaisical young writer to his senses. On one occasion, Fyodor received 1,000 rubles from his guardian, but the very next morning tackled the amazed doctor for a loan of 5 rubles. On the 1st of February, 1844, a new remittance, likewise for 1,000 rubles, arrived, but toward evening Dostoevsky had only 100 left. He had contrived to lose the rest at billiards and dominoes. He lent money to the doctor's poorest patients, paid fantastic sums to scalpers for tickets to Liszt's concerts, or for performances of Ruslan and Lyudmila, and when Reisenkampf caught a cold, he cured him by a method all his own, bringing the doctor to Lurch's well-known restaurant. He treated him to such a dinner of game, wine, and champagne that the patient recovered overnight. After the concerts and champagne dinners, however, it was necessary to subsist on crackers and milk, and even for these he had to run up a bill at his grocer's. During the winter he was subject to colds. His rooms were unheated since there was no money for firewood. To keep warm, he used to frequent taverns and sit for hours on end with lost souls, cashiered government clerks, rum pots, card sharps, and suspicious persons of both sexes. One of these fugitives from the St. Petersburg underworld, a pickpocket and toady by the name of Keller, became Dostoevsky's constant bottle companion. However, it was Keller who drank the vodka. Fyodor was not at all drawn to alcohol and actually could not take it. He avoided strong drink. At taverns and during friendly gatherings, he drank wine or beer, and even these in small quantities. As for eating, his attitude to it was rather indifferent, but he did have a sweet tooth and was very fond of candy and pastries. He was at that time markedly thin and sickly. He was susceptible not only to colds, but to stomach aches and nervous spasms. He astonished his friends by his oddities. He was superstitious, attributed great significance to signs, symbols, omens, and prophecies, patronized female fortune tellers, and was haunted by an inordinate fear of falling into a lethargy and being buried alive. This phobia attained such proportion that whenever he was unwell, he would leave a note on his desk, requesting that in the event of his death he was not to be buried until 5 days afterward. Once, on coming across the funeral procession, he fainted away. Despite the outward disorderliness of his existence, Dostoevsky was working persistently and systematically on poor folk. He had staked everything on this short novel. If my undertaking does not succeed, he wrote Michael, I may hang myself. In 1845, wretchedly poor, sickly and weary, lonely and utterly unknown, he was constantly reworking and this correcting this first outstanding work of his, yet did not know what to do with it, whether he should send it to some periodical or try publishing it himself. Troubled and unable to come to any decision, he lost weight and could not sleep at night. Yet his torments held a peculiar pleasure for him. No, if ever I was happy, he wrote, in the humiliated and wronged, it was at that time when I had not yet read or even shown my manuscript to anyone. During those long nights spent in rapturous hopes and dreams and a passionate love of hard work, when I had grown used to living with my fantasy, with the characters I myself had created, as if they were my kindred, as if they had an actual existence, loving them, rejoicing and grieving with them, and now and then shedding the most sincere tears over my unpretentious hero. However, in May 1845, Dmitri Grigorovich, the future author of the Anton Gorem, Goremka, Gorem, Goremka, Goremika, Goremik, I can't say it, and friend of many Russian and French literateurs of the 19th century, who was sharing Dostoevsky's quarters, showed the manuscript of Poor Folk to the poet Nekrasov, at the time editing an annual of prose and verse. After reading the novel, Nekrasov became so enthusiastic that he decided to visit the young author immediately. In vain did Grigorovich suggest postponing the visit, pointing out that at 4 a.m, Dostoevsky was probably asleep. What does it matter if he is? Nekrasov flared up. We'll awaken him. This is more important than sleep. The impression made on Dostoevsky by this night visit, by the excited praises and hugs bestowed upon him by Nekrasov, was unforgettable. Fame had come to him with the dawning of a spring day in St. Petersburg. The dream of his youth had been fulfilled. That was the most rapturous day of my whole life, he confessed many years later. A meeting with Belinsky, who also appraised the novel highly, did much to strengthen his joyous mood. The great critic described Poor Folk as horror and tragedy. Many of those who read the novel in manuscript could not help shedding tears of pity. Love was the theme of this story, but a love meek, dreamy, and unhappy. Makar Devushkin, a petty government clerk, elderly and homely, who had fallen in love with a much younger woman, Barbara, a next-door neighbor of his, did not at all resemble a romantic hero. He labored under every imaginable handicap: timidity, awkwardness, poverty, naivete, and he himself despaired of winning the girl. He merely pitied her, wanted to help her, to make her life of toil and need easier. And self-denial was all the joy he derived from his love. To sacrifice himself, to spend his beggarly savings upon her, to endure privations for her sake, to the extent of giving up smoking, of going around in ragged clothes, so that he might send her dainties and flowers. To sacrifice himself with resignation, in secret, without expecting any reward. There you have the love of a little man living in the backlots of life. This oppressed, this oppressed, and if you like, rather simple-minded government clerk, who had lost even the buttons of his uniform, spoke in the simplest language. Yet it became evident from his unpretentious story that the most oppressed man, the last of the least, is a man nevertheless, and to be called my brother. Barbara, at long last, sees through his white lies, his neediness, and his sacrifices, and decides to go away in order to make his lot easier, and to save herself from poverty by marrying a decent man with money, though she does not love her wooer, and even fears him, being doubtful of his feelings toward her. Thus ends Makar's dream, and he is left crushed and lonely in the darkness and drabness of that underground existence, which was the lot of the St. Petersburg poor. We still have not got to Maria, but I suspect she'll be here before at least 60 or 70 more pages. I apologize, Stanley, for mocking this book. All right, that's all, bros. Goodbye.